The alarm buzzed sharply at 6 a.m., slicing through the stillness of the small suburban house in Vermont. Julia Carson groaned as she reached out from under the covers, smacking the snooze button harder than she meant to. She hated mornings, not just because they marked the beginning of another workday, but because they meant facing everything she hadn't dealt with from the day before. She threw her legs over the edge of the bed and sighed. Her husband, Brian, was already gone. He always left early for his job at the auto repair shop. Their kids, Mason and Ellie, were still asleep upstairs. The kitchen was a mess. There were dishes from last night, backpacks cluttering the floor, and yesterday's mail left unopened. Julia clenched her jaw. One more thing out of place, and she knew it would happen again. She'd lose it. She always did. At school drop-off, she snapped at Mason for forgetting his water bottle. At the office, she barked at her assistant when the wrong files were placed on her desk. And at 6:45 p.m., when she came home to find Ellie drawing on the walls with marker, Julia erupted. "What were you thinking? You're 10 years old, Ellie." 10. "Not 3. She shouted, her voice shaking the picture frames on the wall. "I've told you 1,000 times not to do this." Ellie burst into tears and ran up the stairs. Julia stood in the hallway, fists clenched, heart pounding, chest heaving with frustration. Brian came in through the back door, holding groceries, and paused when he saw her. "Jules," he said cautiously. "What happened?" "She did it again," Julia snapped, pointing at the wall. Brian set the bags down. "Okay, we'll clean it. But you yelling like that doesn't help anyone." "I wouldn't yell if anyone listened to me," she shouted. And that was it. Another evening drowned in silence, tension thick in the air. Later that night, when the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, Julia sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and stared at the wall. Her eyes stung with guilt. She wasn't a bad mother. Or was she? She remembered her father's booming voice when she was a child. How he'd slam the table, curse, yell. She had sworn she would never be like him. And yet here she was, exploding. The next morning Julia typed, "Why do I explode when I'm angry?" into Google. Few links popped up. One headline caught her attention. "If you explode when angry, it means you're holding too much in." She clicked on it. The article said that people who blow up easily often suppress their emotions for too long. They bottle up stress, resentment, fear, and pain until it finally spills over. The article suggested therapy and mindfulness, but what struck Julia most was a line that read, "Anger is often a mask for sadness or fear." She closed her laptop and sat there, staring into the quiet space of her kitchen. That evening, she watched Ellie coloring in her notebook, her tiny hand gripping a crayon carefully. Julia walked over and gently said, "Hey, I'm sorry for yelling last night." Ellie blinked in surprise. "It's okay." "No, it's not," Julia said, kneeling beside her. "I need to do better. I'm trying to understand why I get so mad." Ellie nodded slowly, and Julia kissed her forehead. Over the next week, Julia started journaling her emotions. Every time she felt herself getting irritated or overwhelmed, she wrote down what triggered it. She began to notice patterns. It wasn't just about the messy house or forgotten tasks. It was about not feeling heard, not feeling supported, feeling like everything depended on her. One evening, she sat with Brian and opened up. "I need help. I can't carry everything alone. And I think it's making me angry all the time." Brian listened, nodding. "I've noticed. I didn't know what to do. I think I need to talk to someone, like a counselor," she admitted. Brian reached across the table and took her hand. "Then let's do it together." Julia found a local therapist named Melissa who specialized in family dynamics and anger management. In the first session, Julia unloaded everything. Her childhood, her father's temper, her own guilt. Melissa listened patiently and then said, "Julia, when you explode, it's not just anger. It's your body screaming that it's overwhelmed. It's the result of not being allowed to feel safe expressing your needs." That resonated deeply. Week after week, Julia began to understand her triggers. She learned to recognize when her body was entering fight or flight mode. She practiced deep breathing, took breaks, and learned to communicate instead of react. Meanwhile, things at home began to shift. Brian stepped up more, doing the dishes, helping with homework, giving her time to rest. The kids noticed too. They stopped walking on eggshells. Julia could feel the change. One afternoon, Ellie accidentally spilled juice all over the white couch. Julia froze. She could feel the heat rising in her face, the surge of emotion begging to be unleashed. But this time she took a breath. "It's okay," she said softly. "Accidents happen. Let's clean it up together." Ellie's eyes widened. "You're not mad." "No," Julia smiled. "Because I've learned it's not the end of the world." By month 3, Julia was unrecognizable to herself. Her heart was softer, her voice calmer. She was learning to forgive herself, and she was teaching her kids how to manage their emotions in a healthy way. One evening, Mason brought home a school project. He had to make a poster about a famous quote that described someone in his family. He chose one that read, "The strongest people are not those who show strength in front of us, but those who win battles we know nothing about." He smiled shyly. "I picked it because of you, Mom." Tears welled up in Julia's eyes. "Thank you, Mason." She realized then that healing wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, growth, and choosing every day to show up differently, even when it was hard. And perhaps, if you explode when angry, it means you've been strong for too long, and it's time to be gentle with yourself.